Hey everybody. So today what I'm going to show you how to do is make some quick stamps for Encaustics. When I do Encaustics, I like to be able to make marks in the wax that are not necessarily from something like a store-bought stamp or pre-made embossing items. I kind of like it to have a flavor all of my own. I'm going to be working on some encaustics that have horses in them, so what I am opting to do is make a couple of different horseshoe stamps so I can emboss gold horseshoes into my encaustic. So what you're going to need to be able to do this is pine, some variety of softwood, a cutting implement. You can use chisels, but the thing that I find easiest is my Dremel. So you can take a lot of wood away very quickly and you can be relatively accurate with it. And that's pretty much it. I'm also going to use my chop saw to cut the stamps off when I'm done with them. So you can see it does help to have a vise, something to hold your stamp for you. This is a very rustic looking little horseshoe. One of the last things I had intended to do for it before I cut it off the remainder of the block is press some holes into it that are going to represent where the horseshoe nails would go. Now, the reason I had suggested using pine is because it's ridiculously soft. I mean, you can make that kind of mark with just a pen. I don't necessarily know that the wax is going to catch in this. If it catches in one or two of them, that's great. If not, that's fine. I like for my encaustics to look very rustic and gritty, so this works for my style of wax work. So I'm going to cut the camera, take this paste off. This one stamp is done. I'm going to take this off with my chop saw, and then we will start with the new one. So here you can see I've got my cute little horseshoe that I did. Super rustic looking. I used the chop saw, hacked it off. I might pull back and clean up this line a little because it left some of the higher edge there. Basically, if you can see this from a relief standpoint, you don't want any edge of your stamp to be higher than the form that you're trying to leave. So I don't want any of these tall edges to be higher than this black part right here because they'll show up in the wax. So I might kind of sand that down with a piece of sandpaper. So what I'm going to do is make a second horseshoe. Not to bore you all, but I think in my image what I'd like to be able to do is kind of vary up a couple different pieces. I also might do something like a Western Star, kind of mix it in. So to me, you know, I start out with a basic sketch. I want the two sides of the horseshoe to be lined up and even. I also want it to be proportionate, a little bit wider than this. I always tried to pre-rec out of drawing classes because drawing was never my strong suit. Because of that, sometimes I get into instances like this where I'm trying to do something sculptural and wishing I had better drawing skills, but I would say that's a pretty good basic form for a horseshoe. Now I've got a lot more space than I want to be left over here, so I might bring it over to the chop saw and take off like another 1/8 of an inch. I don't want too much wood around the stamp because then there's the chance that, you know, it might, the extra wood might leave an impression in the wax too. So let me pop over to the saw and take care of that. Okay, so you can see that I used the chop saw, which clearly needs a new blade, to take off more of the remaining wood over here. At this point, what I'm going to do is start kind of carving it out with my Dremel. Now, this is the only bit that I have on my Dremel at this time. That's fine because I've gotten to a point where I could just work with it. But there are other different tips, like pointed tips and straight tips that you can use that would probably make this kind of detail work easier. But I'm just trying to give you a quick tutorial of the kind of thing that I do to make my Encaustics more me and less standard. So let's fire up the Dremel. So I'm basically kind of trying to shape out the very outer lines. I like to try to make a pretty sharp cut, and then that way I can kind of use that as the template. Now, one of the tricks that I'm going to show you in a minute is how to make sure you're not cutting too much or cutting the wrong area. Just remember, wood carving is a subtractive method, so you can always take more away, you cannot add it back. So you really just want to tickle it when you're doing this. Also, you can see that the blade will catch if you have deeper grooves, so try to avoid making deeper grooves early on. I think what we're going to do is go to the point where I tell you this is graphite powder. Of course, I'm using something that really should be a top coat for my embossing, but that's okay. You want to take graphite powder, pencil, graphite, you can use like pencil shredding, something of that nature, and rub it on the wood. And basically what that's going to show you is a better, more defined line of what you've already cut and what you need to cut. So you can kind of see the graphite just fills in those spaces where there's wood that needs to be taken away. Sorry about the recording quality. Sawdust tends to get everywhere when you do things like this, especially this fine powdery work. And you're literally just tickling it to death, I would say. Every time you're doing this, you're taking a little bit more down and a little bit more down. And it's funny because the thing is, with stamps, with embossing and stamps, you don't really need for it to be a super deep relief. In other words, you don't need to take away a lot all the way around it. You just need to take away enough so that when you press down, the wax is going to show a defined difference. So I'm going to do a little bit more on camera. I'm going to cut you and come back when I got some of the deeper grooves in. Again, there are other Dremel heads. I just don't have them at the moment. And I kind of wanted to get this Encaustic done today. So we'll be back in a second. So after much searching, I actually did find a different Dremel blade. I don't know if you could see that because my camera, not so par. But basically it's a little screw head tip looking Dremel Brit. I don't know what the technical term is for it. It's kind of cool though because I was able to get into some of the crevices of the horseshoe a little bit better, which is good. And I can kind of show you how I did that. I got this one to be a little bit deeper in relief, which is nice. So first, I think what I want to show you is using the charcoal powder again. And this is just giving me an idea of what the shape looks like at this point, where all the cut lines are and crevices. So it just kind of gives me a better idea of the overall shape of the piece. Kind of funny, I know you can hear things banging around. I'm probably like one of the messier artists you've seen on film, but anyway. That's what happens when you work in a bazillion medias. So I'm literally just using this to kind of tickle around the edges and fine up some of the things that were a little more scruffy looking. And that's about it. So, 2 different size horseshoes for my embossing pleasure. I think I kind of like these cut marks that were made by the round tool, so I'm going to go in and kind of recreate them on here and then cut them off. And what I will show you as the end result of this video is the done Encaustics, and hopefully they look awesome. Wish me luck. Bye.